The room fell silent the moment the lawyer opened my grandfather's will. My cousins leaned forward, already smiling. Everyone knew they were about to become millionaires. My father adjusted his tie, confident. My brother smirked, rehearsing his victory smile. And then, the lawyer read my name. $50. Laughter erupted around me. My dad whispered, "Well, that says everything." But I didn't react. Because when I unfolded that $50 bill, my heart stopped. Grandpa had marked something on it, something only I would understand. And when I took it to the bank the next morning, the manager looked at me and froze. Stay with us. This amazing story will leave you speechless. Before we get started, hit like, share, and subscribe, and drop your location in the comments. The room felt too polished to be real: gold-framed paintings, thick carpets that swallowed footsteps, and a long mahogany table where my family sat like royalty waiting to be crowned. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, illuminating the tension that clung to the air like humidity before a storm. Everyone spoke in low whispers, the kind people used when they believed the future belonged to them. My cousins joked about vacations they would take. My uncle bragged about the business expansion he already had planned. And my father sat straight-backed with a proud, satisfied expression, as though the millions were already resting safely in his pockets. Across from me, my older brother, Nathan, leaned forward with a smug grin. "Don't worry, sis," he whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Maybe Grandpa left you something sentimental. A book. A pen. A hug." A few relatives snickered. I didn't react. I never did. Growing up in this family taught me a valuable skill. Silence carried more power than arguments ever could. The lawyer finally entered, carrying a thick binder with a seriousness that made everyone straighten. He introduced himself, adjusted his glasses, and began reading the will. The room sat frozen, hanging on every word. One by one, names were called. One by one, millions were distributed. My cousins gasped dramatically, already fantasizing about the expensive cars and new houses they'd buy. Even my uncle, a man who pretended he wasn't desperate for money, couldn't hide his excitement when he received his share. Then the lawyer said my name. My father's smile widened. Nathan folded his arms, confident. I prepared myself, but not for what came next. "To my granddaughter," the lawyer paused, cleared his throat, and continued, "I leave the sum of $50. The room burst into laughter. Actual, echoing laughter. Nathan slapped the table, wiping tears from his eyes. $50, he shouted. "Oh wow, maybe you can buy yourself a confidence class." My father didn't laugh, but the approval in his eyes was unmistakable. To him, this confirmed something he believed about me for years. I didn't laugh. I didn't flinch. I simply stared at the crisp $50 bill the lawyer handed me, noticing the faint pencil mark on its corner, so small anyone else would miss it. And in that moment, while everyone celebrated their millions, something deep inside me whispered that this wasn't an insult. It was the beginning of something they were too blind to see. Growing up, everyone assumed I wasn't close to my grandfather. They saw us together only in passing. Quiet exchanges, brief smiles, subtle nods. Unlike my cousins, I didn't cling to him during family gatherings. I didn't beg for gifts or brag about how he funded their school trips, or show off the expensive birthday presents he gave them. I was the quiet one, the observer, the girl who preferred books over noise and listening over yelling. People mistook silence for distance, and my family, who loved loudness and greed, never understood a bond that didn't scream for attention. But the truth was entirely different. My moments with Grandpa didn't happen in front of anyone. They happened in early mornings when no one else woke up. They happened in his workshop behind the old orchard, where the scent of wood shavings and engine oil filled the air. They happened in secret fishing trips he called mind-clearing missions. He taught me patience, discipline, and the value of noticing what the world ignores. He once told me, "Most people only see what money can buy. Very few see the things money can't hide." I never knew what he meant until now. He saw how my father treated me, dismissive, controlling, convinced I'd never amount to anything because I didn't chase success the way he defined it. He saw how Nathan mocked everything I did, calling me the unnecessary child whenever he got the chance. Grandpa was always watching, not judging but understanding. And in quiet moments he'd say things that only made sense years later. "Stay true, kiddo. The world tests the ones it plans to trust the most." But in my family's eyes, my silence made me unremarkable. Uninteresting. Unimportant. While they spent holidays flaunting their achievements, I sat next to Grandpa listening to stories about resilience, loss, rebuilding, and the hidden side of business. Things he never shared with anyone else. He gave them things. He gave me lessons. It was never equal, but it was never meant to be. And because he didn't shower me with expensive gifts, everyone assumed he didn't care for me at all. He barely knows you, Nathan once sneered. He only tolerates you because you're family. I pretended not to care. Grandpa pretended not to hear. But later that evening, he handed me a small compass and said, "When the time comes, you'll be the only one who knows which direction to follow." Back then I didn't understand. Today, as I stared at the marked $50 bill, I realized that maybe, just maybe, he had been preparing me for something bigger all along. The moment we stepped out of the lawyer's office, the hallway filled with the kind of laughter that stings long after it ends. My cousins were still giddy, waving their checks around like lottery winners, bragging about their new $1 million lifestyles. Nathan walked at the center of them as if he had suddenly been promoted to royalty. He held his envelope with the confidence of someone who believed he deserved everything handed to him. When he saw me walking quietly behind the group, he slowed down just enough to twist the knife a little deeper. "So sis," he said loudly, "how does it feel to be worth less than a tank of gas?" His friends erupted in laughter. Someone added, "Maybe she can frame the 50. It's the only legacy she's getting." Even my aunt, who pretended to be polite on good days, scoffed dismissively. Honestly, I'm surprised he left her anything at all. I kept walking. Not because it didn't hurt, but because reacting would have given them what they wanted, proof that they had power over me. My father, however, didn't let the opportunity pass. He stepped closer, his voice low but sharp enough to cut. "You embarrassed yourself in there," he said. "If you had put more effort into your life, maybe your grandfather would have taken you seriously." I frowned. "Dad, it's not a competition." He scoffed. "Life is always a competition, and you've never understood that." His words weren't new. But today they felt heavier. Crueler. Like he wanted to make sure I stayed small enough for him to control. Nathan leaned against the wall, flicking the edge of his check mockingly. "Come on, Dad. Don't be harsh. He should be grateful. At least Grandpa didn't leave her nothing." He grinned. "Just almost nothing." Their laughter echoed off the walls, mingling with the elevator chime. I tightened my grip around the $50 bill, feeling the texture of the paper and the faint imprint of the pencil mark. Something inside me whispered not to react. Not yet. The real answer was somewhere in that tiny mark. And they were too distracted celebrating their surface-level victory to notice the deeper game at play. My father glanced at me one last time before stepping into the elevator with Nathan. "Take this as a lesson," he said coldly. "You get what you deserve." The doors slid shut. I stood alone in the hallway, but instead of crying or breaking, I stared at the bill in my hand. Its small, mysterious mark suddenly felt heavier than every insult they had thrown at me. Because deep down I knew. My grandfather had never done anything without a reason. I stepped outside the building, needing air, real air, not the suffocating mix of perfume, ego, and entitlement that lingered inside. The afternoon sun felt strangely warm on my skin, grounding me as traffic hummed in the distance. I found a quiet bench near the sidewalk and finally let myself look closely at the $50 bill still clutched in my hand. The laughter from earlier still echoed somewhere in my mind, but now it felt distant, unimportant, like background noise in a movie where the real plot quietly unfolds off-screen. I flattened the bill carefully across my knee, tracing the tiny pencil mark near the lower corner with my thumb. It was faint, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. A short line. A dot under it. Then another tiny slash beside it. Anyone else would think it was a random smudge or maybe cashier scribble. But I knew better. I had seen this before, many times. My heartbeat slowed, then kicked into a faster rhythm. This wasn't a mark. It was a message. When I was 13, Grandpa and I spent an entire summer in his workshop decoding old maps and creating secret symbols for fun. He told me, "One day when words fail or people lie, these little codes will speak louder than anything." I thought it was just one of our weird bonding activities, something quirky and sweet. But sitting there on that bench, the memory came back with sharp clarity. The mark on the bill wasn't random. It was one of the codes we created together. One meant start here. Another meant look deeper. And this one meant follow the sequence. My breath caught. Why would he put this symbol, our private symbol, on a $50 bill? Why give it only to me knowing the entire family would witness it? Why hide something inside a gesture that looked like humiliation to everyone else? Because he knew exactly how they would react. And he knew exactly how I would think. Grandpa never believed in flashy displays or easy rewards. Everything he valued had layers, hidden meaning, intention. While everyone else saw money as the treasure, he always saw clues, ideas, and secrets as the real wealth. The $50 suddenly felt less like an insult and more like a doorway. A key. Yes. I looked at the symbol again, this time with understanding. Follow the sequence. It wasn't just a message. It was an instruction. A trail he had left behind. One only I could find, only I could read, and only I was meant to follow. And for the first time since the will reading, I felt something stronger than humiliation. I felt chosen. The next morning, I walked into Brookshire National Bank with the $50 bill tucked safely inside my jacket pocket. The moment the glass doors slid open, a wave of cool, sterile air hit me, a sharp contrast to the humid pressure of everything my family dumped on me yesterday. I didn't fully understand what I was searching for. Answers? Confirmation? Maybe I just needed to know why Grandpa, a billionaire, wanted me to walk out of his will reading with almost nothing. But deep down, I already knew the truth. He didn't leave me nothing. He left me something only I could unlock. I stepped up to the counter, handing the bill to the young teller. "I'd like to deposit this," I said casually, though my pulse thrummed beneath my skin. She smiled politely, typing in my account number. But the moment she fed the bill into the scanner, her expression changed. Confusion flickered, then something like alarm. She looked at the screen longer than necessary, her fingers hovering uncertainly. Just a moment," she murmured, standing up abruptly. She walked away faster than someone normally would, disappearing through a door marked "Authorized Person Only." My stomach tightened. A few seconds later, a tall man in a navy suit appeared, his face composed but his stride urgent. He approached the counter, glanced at the scanner, then at the bill resting beside it. His jaw tightened before he lifted the bill carefully, almost reverently, as if it wasn't currency, but evidence. "Miss, would you come with me, please?" he asked. Every instinct inside me screamed to run, but Grandpa always taught me that when truth knocks, you open the door, even if you're scared. I nodded and followed him into a glass-enclosed office at the back of the bank. He closed the door gently, not dramatically, but with a kind of deliberate respect. He placed the bill on his desk and looked at me with a strange mixture of caution and recognition. "You're the granddaughter," he said. My breath hitched. "You knew my grandfather?" He nodded slowly. "Not personally. But he instructed this bank, very clearly, that if you ever brought this exact bill, we were to retrieve something for you." He reached into a locked drawer, removed a sealed envelope covered in dust, and set it between us. My name was written on it. Not printed. Not typed. But handwritten. By him. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier, as if the envelope carried the weight of every secret Grandpa never said aloud. The manager folded his hands and stepped back. "Your grandfather told us," he said quietly, "that when this envelope reaches you, your real inheritance begins." The envelope felt heavier than paper should ever feel. It wasn't thick, just one or two sheets inside, but the weight of it pressed against my palms like a pulse. My name, written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting, seemed to stare back at me. He always wrote with confident, slanted strokes, and seeing them now, it felt like he was still here, speaking through ink and memory. I sat down slowly in the chair across from the bank manager, the room suddenly too quiet. The sounds of printers, footsteps, and whispered conversations outside the glass walls faded to a distant hum. My fingers trembled slightly as I slid a thumb under the flap. The glue cracked softly, a fragile sound that somehow felt monumental. When I pulled out the contents, I found three things: a small silver key, a folded map, and a letter. The letter was aged around the edges, as if he'd written it years ago and waited for the right moment. My eyes scanned the first line and my breath caught. "If you're reading this, it means the family has shown their true colors. Exactly as I expected." I swallowed hard and continued. "Money reveals people. I never wanted you to be burdened by the same greed that consumed the rest of them. You were different. You listened. You saw what others ignored. That is why your inheritance is not in that room where they laughed. but in something only you can understand. My hands tightened on the page. Grandpa hadn't overlooked me. He had chosen me. The map unfolded across my lap. It wasn't a normal printed map. It was something he drew himself, with familiar lines and markings I had seen before during our workshop lessons. A cluster of trees, a dirt road, a small square marked with an X. At the bottom, in his handwriting, the place where truth sleeps. The silver key, cool against my skin, had numbers etched into its side. Numbers that matched the coordinates on the map. The manager watched me with respectful silence. He prepared that 5 years ago, he said gently. And he made it clear. This envelope was never to be opened unless you personally brought in that exact $50 bill. I nodded, unable to speak. The realization washed over me slowly, deeply. The insult everyone celebrated yesterday was actually the trigger to the door of a secret he left only for me. As I folded the letter carefully, the weight in my chest shifted, not heavy with confusion but heavy with purpose. Grandpa hadn't left me behind. He was leading me forward. I hadn't even made it home when the first call came in. My phone buzzed relentlessly, Nathan's name flashing across the screen like a warning signal. I ignored it. A minute later, Dad called. Then my aunt. Then 2 cousins. One after another. 5 missed calls, then 10, then 12. Something was wrong. Or rather, something was happening. Something they weren't expecting. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, my phone vibrated again. This time with a message from Nathan. "What did you do at the bank?" I stared at the words, my pulse quickening. How did they know I even went there? Before I could think, another message came in, this one from my father. "Need to speak. Urgent." Dad never used the word urgent unless it involved money, reputation, or himself. And since he had just inherited millions, this sudden desperation didn't add up. Unless their celebration had turned sour. Unless the strange thing that happened at the bank somehow reached them. Unless Grandpa's quiet, hidden world had started leaking into theirs. I walked upstairs, the envelope and map tucked safely in my bag. Inside, my apartment felt unfamiliar, like the air had shifted while I was gone. I set everything on the table, pacing slowly as my phone lit up again. "Aunt Marlene, call me back immediately." "Cousin Blake, what's going on?" "Everyone is freaking out." "Unknown number. We need to discuss your grandfather's accounts." "Accounts?" My stomach tightened. They thought I had gone to claim something. They thought Grandpa had left me more than $50. They thought I was hiding something. The irony would have been funny if the situation wasn't so tense. Then Nathan sent a final message, short, sharp, telling. "Dad said you got something. You better tell us before things get complicated." Complicated. That word lingered in the air like smoke. I sank onto the sofa, staring at the folded map on the table. My family wasn't panicking out of concern. They were panicking because they sensed a threat. Something that might affect their money, their control, their precious image. And the fact that they couldn't name it made them even more afraid. They had spent their entire lives obsessed with wealth. But they'd forgotten one thing. Grandpa never played the game the same way they did. And for the first time they were starting to realize. Neither did I. The dirt road leading to Grandpa's old property felt strangely untouched, as if time itself had stepped aside and allowed the place to sleep. We used to come here when I was little, just the 2 of us, back when summers were long and life felt simple. The sign at the entrance still hung crooked on one nail, the faded words "Wells Workshop," barely visible beneath layers of dust and age. I parked the car, clutching the map in one hand and the silver key in the other, feeling the echo of old memories tug at my chest. The building stood exactly as I remembered. Weathered wood, metal roof rusted from years of storms, and windows clouded with grime. But something about it felt different. Not abandoned. Not forgotten. More like waiting. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the door, the gravel crunching under my shoes. My fingers shook slightly as I inserted the key into the old lock. It fit perfectly, turning with a smooth click that sent a shiver through me. Inside, the scent hit me first. A mix of sawdust, oil, and something faintly metallic. The workshop was dim, sunlight slipping through cracks in the walls and creating thin beams that illuminated floating dust particles. Tools hung neatly on the walls, untouched for years but free of spiderwebs. His old workbench stood exactly where it always had, paint splattered and cluttered with metal pieces he never threw away. Nothing had decayed. Nothing had been disturbed. It was as if he'd been here yesterday. On the far wall, a large tarp covered something sizable. My heart thudded as I approached, my footsteps echoing softly on the wooden floor. When I pulled the tarp back, dust rose in a slow cloud. Beneath it stood an old metal safe, one I had never seen before. It wasn't small. It wasn't decorative. It was industrial grade, bolted to the ground with a lock that matched the numbers on the key. My hands trembled as I slid the key into the safe's lock. The metal clicked, deep and heavy, like a vault being opened after decades. When I pulled the handle, the safe door creaked open, revealing several stacks of documents, a few sealed envelopes and a small wooden box. My breath caught in my throat. These weren't random papers. They were meticulously organized files, labeled contracts, land deeds, financial agreements, and private letters. All with Grandpa's handwriting. All meant for me. The workshop wasn't abandoned. It was a vault. And what lay inside wasn't just inheritance. It was a truth he had hidden from everyone else. And trusted only me to uncover. The papers inside the safe didn't just hold information. They held a pulse. A heartbeat of something alive, something hidden, something that had existed quietly behind my grandfather's public world. I pulled out the first stack and set it on the workbench beneath a sliver of sunlight. The dust floated around me like drifting memories as I flipped through the documents, each page revealing a new layer of a reality I never knew existed. The first folder contained a land deed, hundreds of acres of untouched property scattered across 3 different states, all registered under obscure holding companies. My breath caught as I scanned the numbers. These weren't just investments. These were prime lands worth tens of millions. Lands no one in my family had ever heard about. Lands acquired quietly, patiently, deliberately. The second folder held financial statements, offshore accounts with balances that made my cousin's million-dollar inheritances look like pocket change. The figures didn't make sense at first. Was this another business? Another life he lived away from the spotlight? Then I found the answer in the margins. Small notes he had written, reminders to himself that now felt like whispers meant for me. Keep this separate. Do not involve the family. For her eyes only. Her. Me. My fingers shook as I opened the wooden box next. Inside were several flash drives, neatly labeled with dates stretching back decades. Alongside them rested a journal, leather-bound, edges worn from years of use. I opened it carefully. The first page made my throat tighten. There are 2 kinds of fortunes, the one the world sees, and the one the wise protect. Each entry after that unfolded a breathtaking reality. Grandpa had built a second empire, one he never revealed publicly. While the family obsessed over the visible wealth, the luxury homes, the corporate stocks, the fancy business events, he quietly built something deeper, safer, and infinitely larger. Investments in renewable energy companies before they became giants. Early stakes in tech startups that later exploded in value. Private gold reserves stored in secure facilities. Shares hidden in trusts that only he controlled. Why hide all this? The answer came pages later. The family I love is not the family I trust. Greed corrodes the heart. I've watched it consume them slowly. But she never wanted anything from me. She only wanted time. My chest ached. All those summers in the workshop. All those fishing trips. All his quiet lessons, they weren't just memories. They were training. He had been preparing me, molding me into the one person capable of handling something the others would destroy the moment their hands touched it. I sat back, overwhelmed, tears slipping down my cheeks without permission. Grandpa hadn't left me scraps. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't disrespected me. He had entrusted me with the part of him he valued most. His life's true work. His hidden empire. And the responsibility that came with it. As I wiped my tears, a realization settled deep in my bones. The $50 bill wasn't a humiliation. It was a key. No. The door it unlocked was wide open. I flipped deeper into the journal, each page carrying the weight of secrets he'd held onto for years. The handwriting, once steady and bold, shifted slightly over time, growing softer, shakier, but the message remained painfully clear. My stomach tightened as I reached an entry marked with a small star in the corner, the same mark he used when something mattered more than everything else. If she finds this, she must understand. Protecting her means telling her the truth. My fingers trembled as I turned the page. Your father was not always like this, the next entry began. But greed grows slowly. It begins with small comparisons, small envies, and then one day it becomes hunger. Your brother was the same. I watched them measure their worth through money, status, and pride. And every time they failed by their own standards, they blamed the world around them. He wrote about moments I vaguely remembered. Holidays where my father sulked because his gift wasn't good enough. Business deals where he blamed Grandpa instead of his own shortcuts. Arguments where Nathan insisted he deserved more simply because he was the eldest son. To them, everything was a competition. Everything was a hierarchy. And if they couldn't be at the top, they became cruel. Then came the lines that made my breath stop. I saw the way they dismissed you. The way they tried to shrink you. They believed kindness was weakness and silence was failure. But I knew better. Silence isn't weakness. It's observation. Patience. Strength. A lump formed in my throat. You were the only one who never asked me for anything but time. You were the only one who listened when I spoke, not out of obligation but because you wanted to learn. His words wrapped around me like a memory. Another line stood out, darker, written with sharper pressure. If I left them the real fortune, they would destroy it, and themselves, within a year. But you will protect what I built. You will understand its purpose. I closed my eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel overshadowed by the family's expectations. I didn't feel like the disappointment they always painted me to be. He saw me. Truly saw me. And then came the final warning, circled twice. They will come for you. Not because they care but because they fear what they don't understand. Trust your instincts. Trust what I've taught you. And above all, do not give them what they think they're entitled to. When I looked up from the journal, the workshop suddenly felt colder. Because Grandpa hadn't just left me a secret empire. He had left me a war I didn't know I was about to fight. I didn't even make it back home before the storm hit. Not the weather, my family. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw my father's car already parked crookedly beside the curb, engines still running. Nathan stood on the porch, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Before I could even step out of the car, he stormed toward me, his face red, eyes burning with accusation. "What did Grandpa leave you?" he demanded. I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play stupid," he snapped, stepping closer. "We know you weren't at the bank for a deposit. Dad got a call. Something went off in the system. Something about a flagged bill. Why would Grandpa leave you a marked bill?" My pulse quickened. They were already suspicious. Faster than I expected. My father walked over, slower but far more controlled. His voice came out low, the kind he used only when he felt threatened. "You need to tell us exactly what you received." I held my bag tighter against my side. "It was just a $50 bill." Nathan scoffed. "Right. A 50 that sets off alarms at a national bank? Do you hear how stupid you sound?" Dad's eyes narrowed. "Your grandfather was not a careless man. If he left you something, even $50, it had a purpose. You know something. And you're going to tell us." His tone wasn't a request. It was a command. Something inside me hardened. "No," I said quietly. Nathan stepped forward aggressively. "Look, don't make this complicated. Whatever you got belongs to all of us. We're family." Family. The word tasted bitter. "You mean the same family that laughed at me yesterday?" I asked softly. Nathan rolled his eyes. "Oh please. Don't be dramatic." Dad added, "This isn't about feelings. This is about our father's assets. Assets you have no right to keep from us." They weren't even hiding it anymore. This wasn't concern. This was fear. Fear that Grandpa gave me something they didn't have. And they were right. I straightened my back. "Grandpa gave you everything you thought mattered. Money. Status. Applause. If he wanted you to have more, he would have given it to you. That's not your decision," Dad snapped. "But it was his," I said softly. Nathan's face twisted with frustration. "You're going to regret this." He didn't scare me. Not anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the powerless one standing in their shadows. I was the one holding the truth. And they knew it. I waited until my father and Nathan finally left, storming off with threats, suspicions, and the same arrogance they'd carried their whole lives. The moment their car disappeared around the corner, I locked the door, pulled the blinds shut, and sat at my dining table with the envelope, the map, and the journal spread out in front of me. I knew I couldn't move forward without answers from the one person Grandpa trusted above everyone else. So I called the attorney on the card tucked inside the journal. A man named Elias Harrington, a name I had never heard before, but the tone of Grandpa's writing made it clear. This was the man he trusted when he didn't trust anyone else. Elias answered on the first ring. "Is this his granddaughter?" he asked quietly as if he already knew. "Yes," I said. I found the journal. There was a silence on the line, a heavy, knowing silence before he spoke again. "I've been waiting for this call for years. Come to my office. Bring everything." His office was nothing like the flashy space where the main will had been read. This place was small, discreet, lined with books instead of expensive art. He closed the door gently after I entered, then sat across from me with a seriousness that made my chest tighten. "I assume they're already after you," he said. I nodded. "They think I'm hiding something." "You are," he replied, "but not in the way they imagine." He opened a locked drawer and pulled out a thick envelope with my name written across the front. My breath hitched. "I've held this for a long time," Elias said. "Your grandfather filed a secondary will, a private one years before his death. He didn't want it mixed with the public documents. He didn't trust the family not to manipulate or interfere." He slid the envelope toward me. "This will concerns the assets they don't know about." I stared at it, my pulse echoing in my ears. Elias continued, "He named you the sole heir of his private holdings, trusts, land acquisitions, intellectual property, and silent venture partnerships. The hidden empire he built. The one he protected. The one he didn't want anyone else to touch." Tears stung my eyes. "He predicted everything," Elias said softly. "The fighting. The greed. The humiliation at the will reading. He wrote that the family would tear each other apart over the visible wealth. And he knew they'd underestimate the one person he trusted, because they always had." I swallowed hard. "What happens now?" Elias folded his hands. "Now we make it legal. And unbreakable. Your grandfather made sure every step was protected." For the first time since his death, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Not confusion. Not fear. Not humiliation. But certainty. Grandpa hadn't left me behind. He had placed me at the center of a plan only I could carry out. 3 days passed before the final blow landed. By then, Elias had already filed the secondary will with the court, making everything official and beyond interference. I thought I'd have time to breathe, to process, to understand the magnitude of what Grandpa entrusted me with. But my family never allowed space for peace. Chaos was their native language. Late in the afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the living room walls in muted gold, I heard pounding on my door, sharp, frantic, almost desperate. Before I could reach it, the door burst open and my father stumbled inside, followed closely by Nathan. Neither of them looked triumphant anymore. They looked panicked. Dad's eyes were bloodshot, his face pale. Nathan looked like he hadn't slept since the day they confronted me. "What did you do?" Dad demanded, his voice shaking. I didn't answer. He stepped closer, slamming a document onto my kitchen table. "The court just froze part of the estate again." Why would they do that unless there were other documents? Unless you knew something?" His voice cracked and suddenly the anger melted into something rawer, fear. For the first time in my life I saw my father not as a force to fear, but as a man terrified of losing everything. "Dad," I said quietly, "what did you expect? Grandpa didn't trust you." "He trusted me more than you," he exploded, pounding a fist on the table. "I worked beside him for years. I helped build his legacy. You," he pointed at me accusingly, "you did nothing." I inhaled sharply. "I listened to him," I replied. "I respected him. I didn't treat him like a walking wallet." Nathan stepped in, tension radiating off him. "You're being dramatic. Whatever you found, whatever he left, it belongs to all of us." "No," I said firmly. "It doesn't." Nathan scoffed, stepping closer as if intimidation still worked. "You think you're better than us now? You think you deserve more?" I looked him dead in the eye. "No. I think I deserved respect. Something neither of you ever gave me." Dad's shoulders slumped. For a brief second he looked older. Smaller. "Please," he whispered, voice cracking. "If you have access to something, help us. I poured everything into those companies. I expected..." He choked on the last word. Security. His desperation would have once broken me. But Grandpa's final warnings echoed in my mind. They will come for you. Do not give them what they think they're entitled to. I steadied myself. I'm sorry, Dad. But what Grandpa left, he left for a reason. You have your inheritance. I have mine. Nathan swore under his breath. Dad's face twisted, not in anger this time but in grief. Not for losing me, but for losing the wealth he thought was already his. And that was the moment I finally understood. They never saw me as family. They only ever saw me as leverage. After my father and Nathan finally left, slamming the door behind them, their voices echoing down the hallway like the fading roar of a storm, I stood completely still. The apartment felt quiet, too quiet, as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for my next move. I looked around at the table where the journal, the maps, and the sealed documents lay spread out like pieces of a puzzle only I could solve. My hands rested on the edge of the table, grounding myself in the moment. This was the turning point Grandpa had prepared me for. The world I knew, the one where my family dictated who I was and what I could become, had ended the moment I opened his journal. From here on, I wasn't acting out of fear, pressure, or desperation. I was acting out of clarity. I sat down slowly and opened the journal again, rereading a line he had underlined twice. Kindness does not require submission. Strength does not require cruelty. That was the answer. I wasn't going to fight them with the same weapons they used against me. Not with manipulation, not with greed, not with emotional warfare. I wasn't them and I didn't want to be. So I made my choice. I wouldn't share the hidden empire. I wouldn't give in to guilt, pressure, or threats. Grandpa didn't spend decades building something only to hand it to people who would destroy it in months. His trust was not a gift. It was a responsibility. But that didn't mean I would hoard it selfishly. I thought about the causes he believed in. The community centers he quietly funded. The scholarships he supported anonymously. The families he helped after fires, storms, and tragedies, never asking for recognition. It was time to continue his work, not repeat my family's mistakes. I opened my laptop and began making notes. Plans to restore the land he protected, set up foundations in his name, support young entrepreneurs the way he once dreamed of doing. Every idea felt like a step toward honoring him, not just inheriting him. My decision was final. Not a dollar of the hidden empire would go to those who mocked me, dismissed me, or tried to break me. Not out of revenge, but out of respect for the man who trusted me when nobody else did. And for the first time in my life I felt something powerful. Control. Purpose. Freedom. This wasn't the end of a chapter. It was the moment I started writing my own. A week after the confrontation with my father and Nathan, I found myself standing in the workshop again. Morning sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, painting warm streaks across the scattered papers and wooden floorboards. The journal, the deeds, the keys, everything Grandpa had trusted me with, remained exactly where I left them. But today I came for one specific thing. The $50 bill. It rested on the workbench beside the compass Grandpa had once given me, the tiny pencil mark still faint but unmistakable. I picked it up gently, holding it between my fingertips. It felt different now. Not like currency, not like a symbol of humiliation, but like a message. The first message he'd left me. I took a slow breath and turned the bill over, running my thumb along the edges. For days I'd been focused on the mark alone. But today, something nudged me to look closer. And when I did, I saw it. A second faint mark near the portrait. Barely visible. A curved line that wasn't random at all. A memory stirred. A summer afternoon in this very workshop. Grandpa drawing symbols in the dirt with a stick. Every mark means something. Every sequence leads somewhere. Heart pounding, I placed the bill flat on the table and opened his journal to the back page. A page filled with diagrams of our old symbols. There was a curved line paired with a dot beneath it. The meaning. Look beneath the surface. My eyes widened. I held the bill up against the sunlight streaming through the cracked window. The paper glowed softly and then I saw it. A faint outline. A hidden imprint of numbers barely pressed into the fibers. Not printed. Not inked. Embossed. I grabbed a pencil and shaded lightly across the surface until the numbers emerged fully. Coordinates. The exact coordinates of the land deed labeled reserved. Do not disclose. My breath caught. This wasn't just an empire. It was a legacy. A map. A final piece of a puzzle only I was meant to solve. I folded the bill carefully and tucked it into the journal, pressing it against my heart for a moment. The weight of everything finally felt clear, not heavy, but right. Standing in that quiet workshop, surrounded by the echoes of his handwriting and the smell of old wood, I whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa, for trusting me." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees like an answer. Soft, steady. The world saw me as the girl who received $50. But the truth only he and I knew, was that the $50 had been the doorway to everything. And now, as I stepped into the sunlight, the path ahead no longer felt uncertain. It felt chosen. By him. And finally by me.